everyone. I hope you're enjoying the morning so far. We are going to be talking to you about establishing Agile content. Maybe before I start, is anybody currently using Agile methodologies in their studio or work environment? Hands up if anybody is. Oh, no. Oh, yeah, there's a few at the back, which is great. Yeah. Well, as Thomas said, actually, Zalando was one of my key areas of running a studio, and we started to really incorporate Agile methodologies because Zalando is a huge tech company, and the tech teams were already doing their sprints every 2 weeks, and so it just seemed a natural way of looking at how we can work more efficiently and better, but also just the increasing demands. And I think with everybody now, the increasing demands of more content is becoming a demand from the top. Do more with less was a really big topic for Flow for anybody that went to Copenhagen. And so we want to be able to just share with you some of the ideas, the ways that we're currently working. I'm going to be moderating the session, but of course, when we get to the Q&A session, if anybody wants to ask me any questions as well, I'm happy to do so. But maybe we just kick it off. There isn't one size fits all, which I think is also a really great way to start this conversation. I'd love to hear from both of you, really, where your Agile, where you are in the Agile way of working and the processes that you are incorporating within your working environment. So, Eloise, maybe you want to start?
Sure. So actually, the way that we can be agile is with structure. So we have like really strict deadlines, stable workflow tool, very robust processes, and that then enables us to sort of flex on the other projects and workflows that we need to do. So that's really, really important for us because, as we all know, product will keep on coming. So we need to maintain that BAU production. Also, for us, having a united leadership around our vision and our purpose, like why are we here, what are we supposed to be doing, and making sure that that's really clear for ourselves and for our teams, framing the opportunities, so making sure our teams understand the commercial, the creative opportunities, so they're really on board with those projects that we run.
Eloise, is it different? Sylvia, is it any different when it comes to working in your department?
You know, to be honest, I think the first and foremost, it's important to give your team the clear vision of the reality of everyday productions. So it's really important to feel of same goals, motivation, and expectations.
Right.
And you know, everybody comes to agile environment from, you know, different ideas of job and with different backgrounds. So I think the role of manager is really to give the whole idea of concept, how we should, you know, produce and create content. So to me, agile mindset is to be open-minded, to predict the results of our actions, to experiment, to willing to cross boundaries, and to facilitate everyday work. The best example is the way how your team deal with all hectic production situations. So if your team can do things cheaper, faster, and better, you know, especially with limited budget and in unstaffed and unpredictable environment, then it's perfect because it means they are open to transform new capabilities and they are open to and they are able to achieve average performance.
Can I ask, so
Yes.
in terms of, because obviously most studios, most common ways of practice and working is everybody has, it's a waterfall effect of being able to stick in a rigid area that they're working in. And obviously with Agile, it's about thinking what happens before you and what happens after and how quickly you can change to adapt. And, you know, obviously adaptability and being able to work differently. How do you even start getting into that process? Because everybody does tend to stay in their lane. The retouchers just stay what they're doing, the stylists do what theirs, and then by asking them to be agile and change the way that they're working for a last-minute project or something, how do you get them used to that mindset?
I think it's important to give them time to play with product.
Right.
So let's face it, day-to-day production can be we are like working in a production line. Of course, it's depending on company, but it's almost the same pattern of work. So this is why it's so important to give your team, time and place to time and space to play with product models, photo studio, and photo equipment, because on this way they practice their creativity.
Right.
And when some challenges come, it will be easier to them to deal with everything. So, and of course, what is important, the results of this kind of test photo production we can use as inspiration for next season, and we can discuss them, and later on we can even use them to refresh the website content. So for me, embracing creativity is very beneficial.
And it's that testing,
And
learning,
testing,
failing, learning.
Yes,
and those
exactly.
similar to the 2-week sprints of just trying to improve. So it's not looking at the larger project gain, but actually these smaller elements where you're practicing almost this instant change that Agile expects you to be. And as Jo said in her talk about how we've got to be more agile in the way that we're working, we can't stay in our lanes anymore. Actually, by doing testing and practicing, then that's actually a really good way to get the teams out of their mindsets.
I have one more very nice examples about agile teams, because not far ago my photo teams offered to iron bed linen because the lady who was responsible for it was absent.
Right.
And so for me, dealing with even tasks below competences is really important, because on this way we will do everything to keep the production going. So agile mindset for me is a synonym to flexibility.
Right.
So if you are flexible, it means you are agile. If you are agile, it means you are flexible.
And so maybe I'll just carry on with you, Sylvia, in terms of like getting new people and actually onboarding new people into an environment that have come from maybe a studio environment that is very traditional in the way that they work. How are you approaching that when new people are coming on board and actually putting them into an agile environment?
Yes, so like I said before, it's really it's really important to specify the reality of everyday production.
Right.
Because yes, everybody come with a different idea of the job. So this is why it's so important to give them a clear vision about our reality and all our challenges. And we need to be honest. And I think it's very important that all of our new team members will know exactly how our team sub-teams work. So one thing you can do is when you employ your new team members, you will give them a week or two, depending how big is your team, that they can learn how exactly their sub-team they work. The sub-teams have workload, challenges, and functions, because then later on they can make decision not only fulfilling their own task, but they can have bearing in mind that their decision impact for whole teams.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like little inductions, but not just their area, actually looking at all the other teams as well. I'm interested as well. Obviously, you can change your practices and the way that you communicate and even your processes, but I'm wondering, is there any tooling in particular, maybe, Eloise, that your teams are using, and maybe if they're not using any tooling to support the way Agile works, is there anything maybe in the future that you're looking at that may be quite interesting to enable and support the Agile way of working?
So we have a workflow tool, so we try and adopt some autonomy in what we do, so we don't have to have like this really heavy email communication, and so I feel that can be an agile way of working. We also are looking at, it's not so much tooling, but process outsourcing, part of our post-production, which will then allow internally to increase those capacities, productivity, and really support when our deliveries hit. We can outsource some of that production, which then gives more time to our in-house teams to really apply that agility.
Right, yeah, freeing up those spaces to
Absolutely.
be able to have those last-minute projects that are always now going to be coming from all angles, I suppose.
Yeah, and something that I think about as a manager when I'm managing my team and the projects that are just ongoing is always holding a little bit of that capacity back, so making sure that the team are really aware of what the expectation is for the production. But actually, I know if a last-minute project does fall in, I sort of know where to pull and which team members that I can give that to maintain then what's expected from the business.
So do you add a little bit extra resource as well?
A little bit, yeah.
Kind of
Try to.
hold it back. Just don't tell the team.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Top tip.
Yeah, absolutely. What about, do you have any kind of like tooling? I don't know how much you can kind of speak about.
Okay, in my organization there is special made to measure photo samples managing system, which it helps us a lot with our everyday production,
Right.
and it thanks to this we can keep our production on track. And we know exactly, we know exactly how to organize the task for the next days. In general, the system shows us how many products we should expect it in the whole season, and less or more, it also shows us when the products should appear on our website.
Right.
So thanks to that, we know how many products we need to photograph, daily, weekly, or monthly. And
So does that help with, so when you are getting those last minute requests or you've got to change things at a moment's notice for commercial reasons or whatever, then you've got, at least you're not got somebody in a back room going through cardboard boxes trying to find something.
Yes, and thanks to that we also have, this, we know when we can have this time to play with, with and do tests.
Yeah.
This is also very important. And one more tools I can share with you, it's mural, and to help, we level up our teamwork by putting there in easy way all photos by drag and drop. We want to work all season. So, for example, we put there all photos for our category website and all our inspiration and all our test shooting.
Right.
And it helps us to know if our idea fits with content we have already done. And what's smart, this mural is an intuitive digital whiteboard. Yes, and you put everything there and you can work
that's
with
helpful.
it. So it's
Great.
pretty amazing.
Yeah. I'm interested to know how Agile can work in a remote world. Obviously now with way that people are now working from home, a lot more working from home. Obviously there are certain skills within the studio that can't be worked from home, but there are some that do. Have either of you adapted the way that you work when it comes to incorporating this remote aspect?
We really have. So obviously over the last few years, it's sort of taught us, and we've had to really change up our processes and move a lot of them remotely. And we have a lot of teams that still work remotely. So we need to be really flexible in terms of what we do and how we do it. It also really supports the team members that they have that flexibility at work. In terms of what benefits it brings, I know some studios really try and fit that production day in between 9 and half 5, 6, and having remote teams enables you to increase those working hours. So again, suits team members' lifestyle, and we can increase those working hours to increase productivity or potentially quality if we take some of that workload out of the day-to-day. So that's been really vital for us. At Selfridges, we have a huge volume of supplier imagery, so that's a big part of our production. And that is super flexible because we don't need to be in the studio taking pictures. So we can really increase and really flex our capacities based on supplier imagery, and it costs less and it's quicker time to site. So, the business are all for that. So yeah, remote working for us is really important.
I suppose communication then becomes a challenge. I don't know whether, Sylvia, as you've become more agile, has your communication style had to change as a leader within your environment?
Within years, I changed a lot my communication with my coworkers. To be honest, I need to admit, before I was a witch, and my perfectionism overwhelmed my team. So after I get, not pleasant feedback about my communication skills, I needed to rethink my, the leadership, my leadership style, and I changed my expectations. I stopped providing answers and solutions. I, gave to my team the ownership of the work, and I started to appreciate their skills and knowledge. And I think, it's also really important as a leader to be open to constructive criticism and to accept other people's various opinions. And it helped us a lot to build trust in your team. So, yes.
I think with having to adapt your style of communication and how you keep things moving on when you've got to move at a lot faster paces, and also you're expecting people to go slightly out of your lane. And this idea of trying, testing, failing, feedback then becomes really crucial. And actually feedback is one of the key, I think if you Google kind of like agile ways of working, feedback is key in terms of learning. And so I'm really interested, how do you manage that process of feedback? Obviously conscious of time as well, we've got a couple of minutes, but I think it would be great to hear how, when it comes to feedback, how are you communicating that to the team, and how are you getting the community, if teams are now more autonomous because you're allowing them to run their own projects and at least learn from that as they're fast-paced rather than directing them, how are you then giving them that feedback as to what worked well, what didn't?
So for me, the best way of providing feedback is to invite your team to conversation where everybody can explore their reflections. I also believe that, right feedback can help us to achieve a success. Your team needs to work in feedback culture.
Right. Get used to the idea of being told.
Yes.
Or working out how to express that this has worked and this hasn't worked.
Yeah, because often feedback is seen as negative information. So we need to apply the bigger picture.
Right.
And for me, the best technique of feedback is feed forward, because feed forward focus on what our creative teams can do better in the future, rather what they did wrong in the past. And it helps your team to choose their own, actions and solutions. And feed forward also help us to empower our team to get responsibility for their own tasks. And I also have my set of, communication technique.
Right.
So I follow 4 rules, what I learned on my mistakes.
Okay.
So first of all, you need to be very specific. Second one is that you need to looking problems, not solutions. Third one is to asking questions, because asking question, can change one-side critique into the dialogue. And the last one, never give to your creative team surprise critique. And I mean, this moment when your photographer work with lighting studio and you come and say, oh, it's too warm, or oh, sorry, it's too light or something. So, the work can be in amorphous stage, and your unnecessary comments can give only them stress and frustration.
I think it's important that when you're giving feedback also to apply it back to the company or department strategy, because then it can't be opinion-led, or it has to talk back to that framework.
And we had a brief chat beforehand, and we were talking about how there are so many different personalities, because you've got so many different personalities in the studio, so many types of either operational people or creative people, that we were talking about all the different personality tests that you can do. I don't know whether many of you know about Myers-Briggs. It's kind of very an old school one, but we were discussing colours, and it's something that I used at Net-a-Porter, and I know that Selfridges uses it, and I'd love you to just like take a minute really to explain how colours and people having colours can really help with the whole process of communication and even feedback.
Absolutely. So for those who don't know, you answer a series of questions and then it outputs your personality type as a colour. And it's really useful to then be able to understand and then adapt your approach to other people who are other colours. So a red can be direct and a green can be potentially emotional and creative, and you will have a natural stance, but throughout your development and learnings and career, you will learn how you can adapt to other personality types to then get the most out of them, get the most out of your time with them. And if you run these exercises with your teams, it also then identifies gaps, which then can support their learning and development, which is really valuable.
Yeah, and I think it was a game changer for us at Net-a-Porter, and I think when you're trying to work in that agile environment and you've got those fast-paced and you've got those high demands, actually people understanding how the other personality works in terms of communication, I think they're really great tools to be able to use. But we're out of time, so I believe it's now down to the Q&A session. I need to take my glasses off now so that I can actually read the things. So, we've got quite a good few questions coming up. So, I don't know, we'll see who wants to take the first one. But the first one is Agile always good? Or are there companies, team structures, areas of work where it's better to stick to the more traditional models? So everybody's staying in their lane, knowing what they have to do. Who wants to take this?
I mean, for us, I've said it, that we have to maintain a structure. And then anything on top of that, we can be agile. So for us, it's a hybrid approach.
So it's like, because it's business as usual,
Absolutely,
right? You've got those numbers that you have to meet every day.
Yes, if we didn't meet those numbers, then we'd all be in trouble.
Yeah. Sylvia, do you take the same approach?
I think it's, it's important to adopting agile way of working. I really believe this, because only this way we can develop and not standing on one place.
Right.
So
interesting. Okay, so there's one directed at you, Sylvia, as well.
Hi.
So, but I'll come back to that one. I was just like, go to the first one. So, how do you make production and creative teams truly work together rather than compete for resources and attention?
We touched on it, but around education, so having your team members really understand what comes before them and what comes after them, so they then understand the impact that their work, or sometimes not their work, will have on teams downstream.
Right, yeah, because it's customer in mind always, right?
Absolutely.
So not just their particular area, which of course they're all going to be passionate about. They're getting the styling right, getting the retouching.
But if there are deadlines that you have to make because there are other teams, post teams after you, you need to make sure that you are meeting that, so the other teams can continue.
And I suppose that testing approach of trying projects that are shorter and smaller, they're not impacting in the business as usual, so therefore then you can kind of try things on.
And I think that we need to allow our team to disagree. Because only disagree, can help us to build, next steps.
Yeah.
And thanks to that, we build very safe space where people can, exchange reflections.
So Sylvia, what is your advice on taking and processing not so pleasant feedback? Did I read that right? What is your advice on taking and processing not so pleasant feedback?
Okay, you need to be honest, and still ask questions.
Right.
Because really, asking questions, like I said before, help you to change one-side critique into a dialogue, and it's really important to understand why your team chose. They made those decisions.
Right.
And ask questions.
Let's go to the top. So externally developed industry-specific studio management tools versus or in-house developed studio management tools, which are better?
I don't know if there is a better. It depends, I suppose, on the resources within your IT departments. It's a huge investment to build something internally, but then potentially you might have the flexibility to manage that internally. But there are so many amazing tools out there that are really agile and can be sort of self-managed. So I can't answer that question. Which is better?
Say me. I can't. Sorry.
I'm also kind of tired. I just think if you are going to do in-house, you've got to have a dedicated tech team with it as well. Because if you're just left to your own devices, then that becomes really challenging. So as long as you've got that backup so that you've got somebody there to continually maintain it. I think with external approaches, they have a team way behind the scenes that's probably got hundreds of people that are constantly maintaining it and updating it. So as long as you've got a great tech support, then yeah, in-house works. But otherwise, like you said, there's some really great tools on the market as well that you can buy off the shelf. This is from Jen. What's the perfect balance of in-house versus freelance resource? It's dropped down. Sorry, Jen, but I'm going to continue it. What's the perfect balance of in-house versus freelance resource to remain agile whilst protect company knowledge and experience? That's actually a really good question.
We work only with in-house team.
Do you?
Yeah, when we talk, of course, about e-commerce team.
Right.
But if there is any possibilities, I think it's very okay to invite someone from outside to give a little bit, fresh point of view. So.
Yeah. Similar for you in terms of like the approach of Selfridges. I imagine they have a set in-house team and then rely on freelancers for peaks and troughs.
Exactly, and our freelance community, we use regularly, so they are almost part of our team. So we don't need to constantly go through that training and onboarding process. Like they're there for us to pull on when we require, and that really works for us.
Yeah, definitely helps. How often do you review your studio space and sets to remain agile to changing content needing to be captured? It's actually a good one for you, Sylvia, in terms of like if you're working on an agile.
Sorry, which one
so the one at the top.
Okay,
so how often do you review the actual studio space? Because obviously with agile working, when you're doing business as usual, you know exactly what numbers, you know the space that you need. But with agility and being able to react quicker, how are you managing that studio space and the sets in those scenarios?
I think when you give your team this place to play, then it will be much more easier to changing all our needs.
So you have a separate area?
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, let's go to the next one. How do you as leaders adapt last-minute requests from organisations and empower your directs to be agile for the same?
I think, but it's the same answer like before. If you give, play to test, then it will be easier to do, everything what is coming to you.
Yeah.
So test, learn.
There's a message.
Yeah.
And I really believe that you have to, as a leader, protect your teams as well. So, really make sure that you understand the capacities and capabilities, because we've all been in situations where we say yes to everything and then the expectation rises, but actually we haven't been given like the resource and the budget to support that. So, it's making sure that you have the commercial understanding as well to protect the resources that you have.
Oh, it's one for me. What is your experience with agile way of working with Net-a-Porter and Zalando? Well, actually, Net-a-Porter was still very the traditional way of working when I was there. So everybody stayed in their lane, did what they were doing in terms of producing the e-commerce imagery. Zalando was really where we got into this agile way of working, and we didn't even get to the point where we really wanted to get to, but the idea of having the photo sets being able to then be used at a last minute's notice for a teaser. What we'd do is we'd look at how the sets were laid up, and if we had an empty set next to it, then we'd just change the color background and be able to then do some extra content using that same model that would just literally nip next door and be able to then work at that quick notice. And the communication then between the buying teams or the marketing teams, the leaders would be having those conversations to know what brands were going to be launched that week, because we worked in a really fast pace. So we took the elements and the speed and the operational skills of the e-commerce teams and actually then started filtering it into doing more banners and press material, Instagram imagery, anywhere where we could. So being able to be flexible and have that agile way of working also was really great for for the teams. And I think that's definitely what we saw, so that they weren't just staying on set, they were able to do something different, and the models could maybe move more freely. So yeah, I think it's a great way of working. And I think, like Joe said, we have to start thinking now. And of course, we have to protect the teams and making sure that we've got enough resource to do the business as usual, but being able to create more of a creative environment that's a hub to be able to do extra projects that in the past was real nice luxury and this is what we could do, but now actually it's becoming an increasing demand. How do you ensure autonomy of employees working in an agile team and also meeting KPIs and deadlines? Do you want to take this one, Eloise?
Shall I? So as I said, we have very strict deadlines and KPIs. So every team member absolutely understands what is expected of them, which gives them autonomy because they could just be getting on with the job.
Right.
And then it would be for us as a management team to then sort of manage that more project-led approach. So if we know that a team member will comfortably meet their KPIs, then we can give them a bit of extra work, which then that's how we work.
And it really enables them the collaboration, right? Because obviously collaboration is also very key, as we said, about communication. So being able to flip between the two and collaborate, knowing full well that some of the teams are on the ground doing it, but then they're going to be pulled away and do the extra projects. And I think that's it. I think we're out of time for this session. So thank you very much for all your questions.
Thank you.